In a world where it seems totally normal to listen to a podcast about the Toronto Argonauts, it's the Xs and Argos podcast.
Welcome to the Xs and Argos season finale podcast, brought to you by Funny Bone Broth. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB as we tie a double blue bow on the 2022 season. And, as well as it being our last podcast of the season, we've still got some news and notes to get to. We've got our annual address to the commissioner. We've got free agents that are must-sign players for the Toronto Argonauts, or must re-sign players, rather, for the Toronto Argonauts. We've got a star to look forward to in 2023, the QB situation, and, of course, our world-famous Xs and Argos awards. All that and more is coming up on this episode of the Xs and Argos podcast. Usually, our first segment of this season finale episode is, was the season a success or failure? JB, I don't feel like we need to spend a ton of time on this. Agree that this was a successful season, winning the Grey Cup?
Yeah, highly successful. I feel that, honestly, I feel like we felt it would be successful, and it was.
I was wondering what would be, like, where could the Argos have gotten to where we would still have deemed it a success? Because back in April, we both said the Argos were going to win the Grey Cup. Falling short of that, in my mind, was fine, but I felt like they had to get to the Grey Cup. I think anything short of getting to the Grey Cup would have been seen as a failure this season, with almost the entire team coming back from last year.
No, I think that's why we were so confident. The East was, not particularly strong, and we had a lot of talent coming back. I don't think it would have been a success had we not made the Grey Cup. I know it feels like a high bar, but the year before set the bar there. It was a lot of talent and they signed great free agents. They really did a fantastic job of adjusting to what they were missing the year before, and the guys they brought in were all game-changing guys. Really, like each of them responsible for at least one victory just by themselves.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty good point. And it's so hard in the CFL. Continuity has been tough for CFL teams. And you see what Winnipeg is doing today, bringing a lot of their core pieces back. And that's one of the reasons they've been successful year after year for a little while now. And the Argos had that advantage this season. They had so many guys coming back in. Like Winnipeg, as much as they were able to keep their core together, they still did lose, some really talented players. Their receiving core had to be remade, even though I guess the heartbeat of that team was still the same. And Toronto last year really didn't lose many players at all, and instead, as you said, added some key free agents. That's going to be the test this year. And when we start going into free agency, like in our February episodes and looking at the free agent frenzy, it's going to be interesting because unlike most CFL teams last year, the Argos had pretty much everybody coming back, but this year, almost everybody is up. The defense, especially, every linebacker they had starting this year has got to be renegotiated or may retire or who knows what. And so, this is going to be a really tough repeat for the Argos, but that's what made this year so important. This was their best chance. They had stability, not so much in, like, there was turnover in the coaching staff, but they had so much stability within the players. And I think that's something that just doesn't happen a lot in the CFL.
No, and will not happen. Next year's Argos will look very different from this team.
There was some interesting news this week that we heard from Ryan Dinwiddie in addressing the media. He told some stories that we hadn't heard before. So the most interesting I found was that he very nearly wasn't in the CFL in 2018, that he had an opportunity to join the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as quality control coach in 2018. And the reason that he ended up staying away from that is that there was a pretty good likelihood that there was going to be a full turnover of that staff following that season. And he didn't want to be in a scenario where after 1 year he had nothing. And so ended up staying with a more sure thing in building, which turned out to be a great decision. Not only did he end up with a head coaching position just a little while after that, but he's now a Grey Cup champion winning coach. What struck you about this story and this revelation?
Well, I think he was right. I think it shows that he's, pretty astute. It was clearly that group of coaches were not very good and were on the way out. But it does, to me, raise a question. He is a guy with real NFL connections. In terms of there being NFL head coaches, will he get offered an NFL position? Is that something? I don't think it wouldn't shock me if there were conversations about him joining a staff.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at, and we've talked about this before, but that quarterback room, everybody behind Kevin Glenn, the trio of them that all basically knew while they were there as quarterbacks that they all wanted to go into coaching. They talked openly about that. And, having talked to Kit Cartwright too, who was their quarterback coach, I guess it was about a year and a half ago, just such an interesting room with so much football intelligence in there. And you've got some success that we've obviously seen with Cliff Kingsbury, obviously the head coach in Arizona, and he's been a little bit up and down, but is generally regarded as a bright young coach. And you've got Zach Taylor, who took his team to the Super Bowl last year, and Coach Dinwiddie, who won the Grey Cup this year. That is a pretty nice trio of backup quarterbacks who all did well. But yeah, you have to wonder if he might look to one of those guys, look to one of his former backups to see at some point if there may be an opportunity, because he's certainly proven that he is a very gifted head coach and a very gifted positional coach and a gifted play caller at that. So with all three of those check marks, I don't think it's going to be long before there are knocks at the door for Coach Dinwiddie. And it's something I hadn't really thought about until I started listening to him talk about this story. And that made me, concern's the wrong word, because I hope it happens for him. I really want to see him get an NFL job, because it means more money, it's more success, it's everything that he deserves. But from a Toronto Argonauts standpoint, that makes me a bit nervous. The Grey Cup celebration, you had them at the Leafs game, the Raptors game, celebrating with Drake, which was awesome. That might have been my favorite moment, because you saw them sort of almost as kids in a way, because they, Drake is such a high level celebrity, and to see him there kind of, partying with them on the court with the Grey Cup and everything else, I thought that was really cool, because they are obviously Drake fans as well. That was kind of a neat thing. And it reminded me of a conversation you and I had years ago, where we were looking for a sort of celebrity endorsement for the Argos.
Yeah, we were looking for the Argos Drake, but turns out the Argos Drake could just be Drake, maybe.
But that was pretty cool. And then it, of course, culminated with the Grey Cup celebration at Maple Leaf Square, which was an amazing, amazing event. You had a terrific turnout. I was nervous about that, and I shouldn't have been, because I should know better than that. As much as the Argos may have struggled in terms of league-wide numbers for attendance, there is such a solid fan base that we talked about, that 11,000 that show up no matter what to every game at BMO Field. Those are such diehards to the level that you don't even have in other CFL cities. And of course, that's the core of the group that's going to show up. And they had a great turnout for the Maple Leaf Square celebration. That place was packed, and there were so many kids in attendance too, which was awesome to see. So all in all, I thought that event was amazing. It was just to see the emotion of the players and the speeches that were made. It was fantastic. And so to be able to share that with all the fans, because not everyone was able to make it out to Regina, I thought was really cool. It's time for our annual address to the commissioner. And JB, we've had some years and some episodes where we've requested many different changes, things to be done completely differently. And I wouldn't say we necessarily see eye to eye with Commissioner Ambrosi on everything, but for the most part, we don't have anything radical for this season to suggest. We liked, I think, all of the rule changes that were made for this season, including the hash marks, which I actually thought went very well. And we think the game is pretty much at a place that we like it right now, but there are a couple things we do want to tweak a little bit, starting with roster size. So what are you looking at when we talk about making adjustments to the roster?
Well, I'd mentioned before, I thought that one minor tweak I would make is come the Grey Cup final, the roster should increase to 50. I don't think you should have to make um, decisions between the final guys on the bubble for the Grey Cup final. I understand during the season, you have restrictions, but for me, at the final, um, you should be able to add those players, and both teams can do it. It doesn't give a competitive advantage, but it is really tough because it ends up squeezing out players at the bottom of the roster who might have family coming or are unsure if they're going to play right up until they finally announce the roster. And I just don't think there's any need at the scale the CFL is. I don't think there's any need to have that kind of last second reveal, crushing a player's hopes of being in the finals. So I think, to me, that's an easy one game exemption.
In terms of rule changes, there was only really one that we felt like needed to change a little bit. We started looking at quarterback sneaks and how what a large percentage of scoring plays were occurring on quarterback sneaks from the one, and it just seemed to be pretty outrageous. And you look at the leading touchdown getters in the CFL this year for rushing touchdowns, and you've got at the top, this is the top of the list, Caleb Evans, Dominic Davis. A little ways down, we got Tommy Stevens, we got Cody Fajardo. These are who are scoring touchdowns, and they're from a yard out. And I think that takes away a really exciting element of the game. Touchdowns should be the most exciting thing to happen in a game, and there's nothing less exciting than a quarterback sneak. It's a boring football play, and I don't think we can eliminate quarterback sneaks from regular gameplay. But I do like the idea, and this wasn't our idea, it was proposed by a number of other people before us, but we really like the idea of the ball coming back out to the 2. If a play ends at the inside the 2-yard line or at the 1-yard line or an inch away from the end zone, no matter where it is, if it's not a touchdown, it comes back to the 2. And that's where the next snap occurs from. I love that idea because it eliminates the quarterback sneak for a touchdown, a play that I hate.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But this kind of crashing into the end zone for a touchdown and essentially like leaving the defense in a position that's almost untenable, where even you want it to be 50-50, but like the odds are so much in the attacking team's favor. It kind of takes all the fun out of the goal line stand. I couldn't agree more. I think that's an easy choice. I would do that tomorrow.
And the reason that it's such a big deal in the CFL is because you've got that 1-yard neutral zone. And so that's why quarterback sneaks are so much more automatic in the CFL than the NFL. The NFL, they don't need to do it because you can be an inch away, and that's still a tough quarterback sneak. That's still much closer to being a 50-50 proposition than it is in the CFL. So that's why they bring it back the full yard. So right now, currently, if you get the ball down an inch away, they bring it back to the 1-yard line, but that's not enough. It's got to come back to the 2 in my eye. You make that one rule change, I'm happy. I'm all set for 2023.
Yeah, I liked the rules they brought in. I like the hash marks. We liked them when they said them, and I thought they all worked out really well. I wouldn't change. You don't want to get into constantly changing. We're not the XFL. I honestly can't think of a game this year where I thought there was a stupid rule. I like the challenge rule. I like what they can challenge. I like how limited it is. I like the punting rule. Yeah, honestly, like I wish I had sort of more harsher or more in-depth analysis. But honestly, I think the league is doing a really good job. I think the NFL could definitely benefit from 3 or 4 CFL rules. So yeah, I with that one change that you suggested, I think they're good to go. Don't I wouldn't change the CFL. Just leave it be.
Let's talk about the must re-sign free agents. JB, this is tough. There's a huge list of players who are free agents come come the start of the new season, and it's gonna be difficult. It's gonna be heartbreaking. There are gonna be a lot of fan favorites who I don't think are gonna be back in double blue next year because, like I said before, it's just not possible. You can't bring everybody in a salary cap league. You cannot bring everybody back after winning a championship unless they were already under contract. Like last year, it would have been possible had they won the Grey Cup because almost the whole team was under contract. But yeah, it's just not going to happen this year. So we looked at the 3 must re-sign free agents on both offense and defense. JB, why don't you go first with the defensive guys? This is priority 1 for the front office to bring these 3 guys back.
Yeah, it's hard to say who's going to actually be a free agent. I think a lot of Argos are probably pondering retirement. So I'm going to kind of go with guys who I think are not going to retire and who I would love to see back. And obviously, have to start with Wynton McManus. He's going to be offered a lot of money. He was probably the defensive player of the league. He was absolutely a game changer for the Argonauts. I have a feeling Mwamba is going to retire. That's not really that bold a statement. So, to bring McManus back to the middle of the field would be huge, but they're going to offer him a lot of money out west. So that'll be an interesting question. But I have McManus number 1. I love. I think a secret MVP of the podcast, I would bring back Shaq Richardson. He is he's a great leader for the secondary. He's a great hitter. He brings a tremendous energy to the team. You can see it at practice. You can see it on game day. Not blowing people away with statistics, but always in the right position, helping everybody get in the right position. You don't realize how important a guy like that is until they're gone. Having somebody back there who can make sure that everybody's got the call and everybody knows where to be, and having somebody who plays correctly, like having a coach on the field. I hope they want him back. I'd love to bring him back for one more year. And if I'm going to go 3 defensive guys, I'm going to go a little off the charts here, but I want to bring back Chris Edwards. I don't know if that's a feeling that the organization has, because I think that there were probably some rocky times between them. But this is not the knitting society or a book club. And you don't necessarily need everybody to be kumbaya. And he brings an edge that I want on my defense. And I'm willing to bring back Chris Edwards. The guy who had the key play in the Grey Cup. I bring back Chris Edwards. That's what I bring back.
Yeah, I love the flexibility of Edwards. I love him as a player too, and he's had ups and downs. There have been moments, but yeah, both he and Shaq, they're I guess Edwards is going to be 30 next year, Shaq 31, but you don't really see, like, I haven't seen a decline in their play. It's actually been the opposite. I feel like with Shaq especially, there's such an awareness that he's got now. And in Coach Mace's defense, it wasn't like speed was really being called on so much. They played so much cover 4, and they're playing off the ball so much in that bend but don't break style that you rarely saw these guys go flat out anyway. And so usually when you get to the above 30 numbers for DBs, you're concerned about speed, the loss of a step. But that really, I think, is far less a factor. Because even the guys that they have, like Jamal Peters has never been like a blazing fast guy, but it doesn't really matter in this setup. That's just not how this defense is designed. They play so little like press man, or put them in situations where they're just going to need to run flat out with a 4-4 guy. It's just not like that. So yeah, I love those decisions. I think those 3, I agree. I think I'd probably put them in the order that you put them in, both in what I would say and in the likelihood of it actually happening. I think that's probably how it's going to go. So we'll see, but fingers crossed for those 3 guys. Looking at the offensive side of the ball, number 1 is easy. It's Curly Gittens Jr. for me. I think this is absolutely has to be the main priority for a few different reasons. One, he's He's the team's best receiver. I don't think there's really any doubt about that. 2, he's Canadian, which gives you that extra bit of roster flexibility. Teams are going to want to offer him the world, and Toronto just they have to match that. Number 2 for me is AJ Ouellette. I think you've got to bring AJ Ouellette back. I think most fans would be in agreement. There was just a magic with him. He got the running game going, and everyone was wondering what would happen when Andrew Harris went down. Now they're left without a star running back. How's it going to go? And in fact, the situation got better. And AJ Ouellette, all the way through the Grey Cup, where he scores 2 touchdowns, was a guy that you couldn't take off the field. Even when Andrew Harris came back, really fully healthy, he had made himself indispensable. There was no way you weren't going to, he wasn't even dressing when Andrew Harris was dressing earlier in the year. He wasn't dressing for games. He was an afterthought. And he played so well and had such a heartbeat for this team that they end up starting him in the Grey Cup. He's the guy that gets 2 touchdowns. So you got to bring him back. He's priority number 2.
Yeah, I mean, one of my strongest memories of the season is an extremely hot summer night where we just lost to Calgary for the first time. And we went to the press conference after, and it was you and I. AJ was there, and he was waiting patiently for McLeod to finish. And he was, he was just standing, leaning on the table, and just empty, just gutted by the loss. Wasn't showing off for anybody. He was, and I just remember being just taken with how this professional athlete was just destroyed by the fact that they couldn't get this win. And you can't fake that. There's a lot of guys, it's a professional sport. It's not high school, it's not college. And that level of emotional commitment, I just really stayed with me. I just had a totally different view of Ouellette after that press conference.
And the third guy I bring back, this one was really tough for me. I went back and forth with a lot of different guys, and I've ended up going with a guy who may very well retire, and that is Philip Blake. And the reason he's my third guy is I could not believe how much more valuable he proved to be this season than I thought he would be. And I was already a Philip Blake fan coming in. I was a big fan of him as a guard. I thought he was a great option in terms of being a backup center if something happened. And instead, he ended up being an outstanding tackle. To have that kind of versatility, and I did not see it fade all season long. I know he's up there in age. We wondered about this, a few years ago when he first signed. He's 37 years old right now. He's going to be turning 38 next year. You just don't see it a lot, but his level of play is high. He can play tackle right now at a CFL level. He can play guard at a CFL level. He can play center at a CFL level. And I don't care what age it says he is, you've got to find a way. If he's not going to retire and he's not set on that, you have to find a way to bring him back. Because if you do, you might already have your lineup set for next year. You might already have a great competition in the returning guys. It's the one positional group that isn't hugely affected. You've got Allen at right tackle. You've got Bladek. You will have Nicastro returning. McKellar proved that he can play guard, and so you could actually have Ryan Hunter as a left tackle. It could work out like that. But Philip Blake is so valuable that I would have him in at that left guard spot, at least to start, see what happens, and know that he can go absolutely anywhere if need be. So for me, he's number 3 on my list.
Yeah, totally agree.
JB, let's talk about the star of 2023. It's fun. This time last year, we made some predictions. Some were great, some were not so great. My favorite was yours in terms of the QB situation, because last year we had no idea what it was going to be. And you said they're going to re-sign McLeod Bethel-Thompson and they're going to bring in some hotshot American quarterback. So, predictions for next year, who is going to be the star of 2023? Maybe someone that's off the radar a little bit now, who will shine in 2023.
Well, my pick is a little unusual because he's a bit old for somebody who you might suddenly determined to be a star. But I think Markeith Ambles is going to be a star next year. I I don't think the Argos bring back Daniels. I think Ambles is going to move into that role. I know he's 31, so you know but I only need him to do it the 1 year. Every year he's increased his receptions. He's only been in the league 4 years. Every year he's increased his receptions. Every year he's increased the yards. Every year he's increased his touchdowns. I think he's good for 100 catches, 1,000 yards, and 8 touchdowns next year. So I put him right in that role. I think, obviously that'll depend on who the quarterback is and so forth, but I really think Ambles can be somebody who steps up in that wide receiver room to take a more dominant role.
Yeah, I would like to see him in the boundary slot, and they've got to bring him back first, obviously. But I think you're going to get it. I think you're going to be able to get Markeith Ambles for a decent price with all of the free agent wide receivers there are going to be in the league this year. I think he is going to be on a few teams' radars, but I think if you're going forward with him as a potential, go-to guy. He and Curly Gittens Jr. together, I think, are a pretty dynamic duo there. So, yeah, I would love to see them bring Ambles back, and I could see him being a star certainly next year. The guy I'm going to go with is a little bit of a risk as well, not for age. I think this is more a traditional a player we'd be looking for this segment, but because we don't know exactly what's going to happen at the position. That's Jack Cassar at middle linebacker. It could be that Enoch Mwamba comes back, and then he would obviously be the middle linebacker again. I don't think there's any doubt he can play at a high level. He won every award you could at the Grey Cup, but that's also why it's the perfect time to retire. He's up there in age. He just won a Grey Cup. He was named most outstanding player of the Grey Cup game and most outstanding Canadian. There is no more you can do. He has now done it all. This season was the perfect. If there was any perfect time for anyone to retire, it is right now for Enoch Mwamba, even though he can still play at a high level. It's just the right time to go out. And he's set up, too, for a future. I think there's interest in him for front office jobs. And we saw that process begin a little bit last year as the Argos had him, in the room for a lot of those draft interviews and things like that, because that's, I think, where he probably wants to transition. He talked about that a few years ago with us. So, I think if he steps away, Jack Cassar is waiting right there. Do they go with him, though, or do they bring in somebody else to go in front of him? And I think if you look at Jack Cassar's play down the stretch, he was all over the field when he stepped in and took over at middle linebacker on the last game of the season and really got that full run. I think you saw flashes of it there. We saw flashes all season on special teams. And I think if there's somebody that is just going to completely not come out of the woodwork, because we've seen those flashes, but not someone that's being looked at next year as even as a potential starter right now, I think he could come out and really impress people. So that's where I'm going to go with my star of 2023.
Especially if they bring McManus back.
Yeah, to play alongside Wyndham McManus would be huge.
It's a really hard position to be good at, and so it's a big ask. But I agree. I mean, we've talked about it. I thought, he was a special team star this year, and if you can groom your own Canadian middle linebacker, that's tremendous.
What will the QB situation be in 2023, JB? This is a question I almost don't want to address, but we've been asked so many times because we don't know. We don't have any way to answer. And this is all going to be speculative here. But we've been asked so many times on Twitter and through DMs, what's it going to look like next year? The fact is we don't know. We have no idea.
If I were to guess, I would guess, an idea that probably is out there, that you would hand the reins over. Kelly would be your starter, and you're kind of rolling with Chad Kelly as your starter. That, if I had to choose, that seems the likeliest to me. But it's still fraught with, is Kelly going to get an NFL camp tryout? Is Kelly want to come back? Is he somebody you can put the franchise on? He definitely did a great job coming in and moving the ball in the fourth quarter, but that's very different than being the face of the franchise. Is he ready to be the face of the franchise? Is he ready to take those hard questions when you lose a game in June? One thing I think people underestimated or underappreciated was just how good McLeod was in those press conferences after tough losses when things aren't going really well. That's a tough ask. So I don't know. If I had to say that's my say.
We're going to know a lot based on McLeod Bethel Thompson's decision. If McLeod wants to come back, you bring him back. He's the quarterback that won you the Grey Cup. The Toronto Argonauts aren't anywhere close this season if it's not for McLeod Bethel Thompson. He was one of the best quarterbacks in the league. It was his best season of his career. If he wants to come back, he is your quarterback for 2023. I don't think it can go any other way. And then at that point, you probably are looking to trade Chad Kelly, because I don't think he's going to stick around to be a backup for another season. I just don't. I think he would choose other options, and there are other options. So I think then you look to trade him to be a starter somewhere else at that point. And I think there's some really good value. Now, what causes issues is if there is NFL interest, and usually there isn't for a player that would be turning 29, I think, as Chad Kelly would be next year, who was in the NFL for a little bit, was a draft pick, bounced around a little bit. Unless it's someone that like absolutely jumped off the board and he didn't have enough playing time to do that this year, then it just doesn't happen a lot in the NFL. But it could because of his outstanding college career, because of his lineage. It's possible, and he certainly would love to do that. Every quarterback would. So that's the question. If there's any way he's not going to be on the team, then that not only completely eliminates any trade value he might have, or if he decides that he would rather do something else than go play for X team, whatever it is that's not Toronto. Remember, he wanted to come to Toronto. Toronto traded for his rights because that's where he wanted to play. So I don't know. I think you can't really do anything until you know for sure with McLeod. And again, back to McLeod, I don't want to see him go because I really enjoyed watching him as a quarterback, especially as he's been able to improve every single year, and this was his best year. But I think, again, if there is the right time to retire, like I said with Enoch Mwamba, this is the right time to retire. If you're gonna call it a career on a Grey Cup win. He's gonna be turning 35 next season. He's got a young daughter, and he's such a family oriented guy. For me, it would be really hard to not retire after that because it's the right moment. But if he wants to come back, you take him.
You're a little more, I think, optimistic than I am. I think the Argos, look, I have been a very ardent McLeod supporter this year. I even wrote an article, even though I don't like writing articles, about him. I think the Argos turn the page. I don't think they bring him back if he wants to come back. I honestly don't. I don't. Professional football can be pretty tough. I think they're very happy with how McLeod played. I think that he was terrific for the team, but I don't think that they bring him back and get rid of Chad Kelly. I think they probably just make the transition choice. That happens. That's tough. It's a thing that franchises run into. We got the young kid, we got the old guy. Who do we bring back? I think McLeod does not play next year, even if he wants to. For the Argos, I think they turn the page to Chad Kelly.
If McLeod Bethel Thompson retired, I wouldn't go the Bo Levi Mitchell route. I actually really like the two guys in the room, even though they're young, unproven, inexperienced. You just won the Grey Cup. you've got a little bit of a grace period here. I run with Ben Holmes and Chad Kelly. I like both those guys. I think you don't need to bring in Bo Levi Mitchell. I think you try and do a little bit of what BC did, where you're probably going to have to renegotiate a little bit with Chad. I think you go with these two young guys and hope they can do it and really try and stack everywhere else and bring back as many of the pieces as you can with the extra money that you have from not having to pay somebody $400,000 or $500,000.
I would have a veteran in the room with Kelly. I think if you're going to hand the keys over to him and you're going to have him be your starter, I think you want somebody in there who has a fair amount of CFL experience, but we'll see.
It's time for the world famous Xs and Argos awards. JB, these were much easier for us this year than last year. Let's run through our award winners. Some are serious, some are a little bit more fun, but we'll go through our list. Our player awards first for positional grading, etc. Offensive line, I thought was pretty easy from a positional group that was very good all season. We went with Dariusz Bladek. He was consistently my highest graded lineman most weeks, especially early in the season, and I felt like he was snubbed as an all-star. But yeah, he wins our X's and Argos award for most outstanding Argonauts lineman. JB, running back was an interesting one. We ended up going with AJ Ouellette for our X's and Argos award. What did it come down to for you in that regard?
Yeah, I think that AJ went from somebody who wasn't getting a lot of carries and was not a big part of the offense, and we weren't really sure what value, to be honest, he had on the field. Like he was a strong player, but he didn't seem to move the ball well, but he didn't have many reps either. And had he not developed into the force that he became, both in catching the ball and being a hammer up the middle, the season's over. There is no Harris comeback. I don't think the Argos probably don't make the playoffs. He got better every game. And scored 2 touchdowns in the Grey Cup final. I mean, I think he absolutely was the best running back for the Argos all season. Harris had his moments early on, but I thought AJ was the story of the year for a guy who just on effort and desire became an all-star.
For a wide receiver, this is an easy one. We've talked about him a lot already. Curly Gittens Jr. is our X's and Argos award winner. I don't even know if we need to say anything more, just other than he was the number one guy. And yes, Argos, if you were listening, bring him back.
Yeah, he was, it was a room that, different guys stepped up for different games, but he was the most consistent. He and McLeod had, I think, the best chemistry.
For defensive line, we got to tip our cap to Dwayne Hendricks, but we are going to go with Sean Oakman as our award winner. He was dominant even when he wasn't putting up numbers. When you look at his play, especially in games, look at games where he has like 2 tackles and no sacks, and look at the impact that he had in that game. For teams to reduce him to that meant that they were paying so much attention to him that it freed up other guys. And part of the reason I think that Hendricks was fantastic this year, but he owes a lot of that to the play of the guy beside him, Sean Oakman, who was phenomenal. And so that's why we are giving our award to Sean Oakman.
Yeah, CN Power. I've never given up on that.
For linebacker, we went with Wyndham McManus, who we felt was the best defensive player in the league. He changed games. He single-handedly won games. Go back to the Halifax game, that pick 6. He was outstanding, and so he's our linebacker award winner.
Yeah, it's very unusual to find a free agent who becomes such a team leader so quickly. I think it speaks to his value as a player. Is guys immediately looked up to him and respected him as a key component of the defense.
And for DB, there's so many places we could have gone here because the DBs we thought had a great season. I know the stats don't say that because it's just the style they play, but that's what it is. They did their job. They're playing their four shells. So that you're going to get yards off that, but just not touchdowns. And
if they could have cleaned up, that one bust play that I think 5 touchdowns were scored on.
Yeah.
That
would have been helpful.
That would have helped.
We went with Jamal Peters, and it just made sense. He was a game changer in his picks, especially in the middle of the season there, where he went on this ridiculous run where every ball thrown was picked by Peters. That was the logical choice for us. But we could have gone with a few different guys there, but Peters is the right choice. For our Special Teams Award winner, we went with Jack Cassar, who led the league in special teams tackles per game and had 4 special teams tackles in the Grey Cup. It's a team that had so many contributors there. You have Josh Haggerty, who's outstanding, Daniel Adebaboye, who's outstanding. You had a punter in John Haggerty who led the league in punting. There were a lot of ways we could have gone here, but Jack Cassar really stood out from I remember the fumble recovery in Ottawa, the strip fumble
huge.
in Ottawa as a special teams play, and just the crushing tackles that he made. He changed the way that returners ran the ball back because there was an element of fear.
And you could tell in the latter couple of games that the coordinators were scheming him up.
Yeah,
because he wasn't making the same level of tackle because they were clearly identifying him as a guy who needed to be addressed.
Our Rookie of the Year could have gone a lot of different ways, too. There were a lot of new Toronto Argonauts who were contributors, but we decided to go with Gregor McKellar, who played most of the season at left guard as a rookie. And this is 2 years in a row now where the Argos have been able to do that. Peter Nicastro, a rookie center, playing most of the season last year and also being named an East All-Star. And Gregor McKellar doing a fantastic job at left guard. He had the benefit of experience next to him in Philip Blake, and that's certainly helpful. But yeah, I thought he was outstanding.
I give him the nod simply because of the complexity of his position. That if you're looking at guys who are coming on and playing, whether it be at running back or wide receiver, like offensive line is an incredibly hard position as a rookie to take on.
And our offensive and defensive MVPs. For offensive MVP, this is an easy one. McLeod Bethel-Thompson. He was the team nominee. He's the East All-Star for the second year in a row as the quarterback, and was the best player on this football team most weeks. He won games for them, and definitely deserves the most outstanding player award for us. So he's our Xs and Argos MVP.
Yeah, I mean, it was an unusual path for me as somebody who had had some questions about him in the past, and we spent a lot of this year defending him. He was great. He had off sections, but also there were a lot of reasons for that. There were offensive line breakdowns, and you had receivers that couldn't get off coverage, and but when he was dialed in, he was fantastic, and he came out and he played terrific in absolute must-have games against Saskatchewan, against Montreal again in the playoffs. He was tremendous. I know he was injured and didn't get to finish the Grey Cup, but that Grey Cup is McLeod Bethel-Thompson's. This team does not win a Grey Cup without him.
No question. And defensive MVP, we went with Enoch Mwamba. He was astonishingly good this season, and even better in the playoffs and in that Grey Cup game. He was just unstoppable. He was a force and a team leader out there as well. So, with like you said earlier, when Wyndham McManus went down again in the East Final, it would have been so easy for the defense just to go flat at that point. To lose a player like that, to have the defense just come out flat in the Grey Cup because there's that loss of confidence. And there was no way Enoch Muamba was going to let that happen. And a player of that caliber, a leader of that caliber, definitely deserves the award.
And, we talk about how good the Argos have been at drafting, and they definitely have been. But also we should talk about how really, really good they have been at signing free agents.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk about the impact that they've had, Mwamba and Beattie and McManus and Jagarrett Davis and Banks. I mean, they've absolutely crushed the free agent signing. Like do they have a miss that was a big free agent signing? I mean, everybody they've brought in, they have absolutely read correctly, felt the connection that they would have on the team, and has been excellent. I don't, for me, in the last 3 years, I don't think they have a free agent miss.
I think you could probably go with Nick Arbuckle, but even that, like, he was playing okay for the Argos. I know he hasn't looked good in other places. He's been up and down, but he actually was playing all right.
It wasn't quite a free agent, too. That was a little more...
It was different. And they needed someone. Our most valuable coach is a tough one because we saw such a great job done from the coaching staff this year, from Ryan Dinwiddie all the way down. As a first-year coach in this position, to deliver what he delivered deserves recognition. And so Coach Mace, as the defensive coordinator, was our coach of the year.
Yeah, and it could have been Coach Bell. I thought he was great to have him back on the staff, and he obviously had that secondary flying around. And Coach Sweet, pieced that thing together until he had an overload of players at the end, but kept that thing going. So yeah, that was a tough one. But Coach Mace had some really, really gorgeous defensive game plans. He deserves it. I think. He will be an excellent head coach.
Our most valuable operations staff member goes, and this could have gone a lot of different ways. You talked about like how well they've done in the draft, how well they've done in free agency. Obviously, we've got to tip our cap to the entire operations staff. Magri and Russell and Pinball, Jim Barker. Like these guys have been amazing. But we're gonna go we're gonna go with John Magri, who we thought is the most underappreciated member of that team. John is fantastic. He does so much work for the team, and as video director, there couldn't be a more passionate member of this Toronto Argonauts club. And I think we got to see it. This was one of my favorite moments of the season. In the press box, there's no cheering. You don't root for either team. You are there professionally to do your job. It's a professional environment. In the East Final, they had to move John Magri out of his normal position in which he had a room to himself as video coordinator, but they just didn't have enough space to be able to accommodate both French and English language broadcasts from the Alouettes crew. And so John got moved into the press box where he's doing his video job. And John is a very passionate individual. And after every big Argos play, he would scream out. And it was awesome to see. I'm not sure everybody covering the Argos and Alouettes that day felt as I did, but I loved it. You could just see his passion, and that's his. He's not pressed. He's supposed to do that. He's part of the team, and so yeah, he should cheer them on. But yeah, he was just blasting the vocals every time there was a great Argos play, and there were a number of them on that day. So that was one of my favorite moments. You just saw the passion, how much he cared about this organization, and he does his job extremely well. he was always the first person I'd say hello to at practice. Great to see him every time I was there. So he's definitely a deserving X's and Argos award winner. And you could throw in, for throwing in all the staff too. And we talk about Adam and the job that he does on the PA, who is fantastic, and Herbie, who came in to do it for that one game, and Herbie, who serves as the team chaplain. He's there every day at practice, getting the guys fired up too. There's so many great guys around the organization, Mike Hogan and Chris Belenovich. There's everybody that works for this team has been an absolute pleasure to work with. And so, choosing John, it's the right choice, but you could have gone so many different directions when you're just sort of looking overall at this Toronto Argonauts staff, because there's no wrong move. JB, we've got a road trip award to give out. This is our first, because it's the first year where we have traveled to all the different destinations. And I thought before we handed out this award, maybe a couple quick stories are in order, because we getting to go to Calgary and Saskatchewan and BC and Halifax. It was interesting for us. What was your favorite road story from this season?
Well, I certainly had more luck on the road than you did. In terms of games. When I was in Halifax, it was a Rough Rider crowd, and we knew that going in. And at Argos practice, they were loose and energetic. They had somebody out taking a lot of photos because it was a kind of a big event, and I enjoyed watching the offensive line trying to get the photographer to take more pictures of them, and doing a lot of poses because they don't often get to be in those kinds of photos. So it was a really good energy heading into the game, and to be there and to watch McManus, go up and down the sideline and basically take the team by the throat and not allow them to give up in that fourth quarter against Saskatchewan, to not just give in to here we go again. We weren't very good. We lost to Winnipeg. We lost to BC. He just wouldn't allow it. And then he made the game winning pick. That was an amazing moment to see that player come through. And the press conference after, which was much more crowded than ones we went to sometimes at BMO. And there was something about that press conference that really stayed with me. It was McLeod and Mwamba, and coach first, but McLeod and Mwamba, and they had this energy about them. There was just such joy at having won that game. Just this feeling that they were on a team that had aspirations of being more, and that this game proved to themselves that they could be more. I was just taken with it. It was when I knew they had a real shot at it, and their excitement at how well they played was really infectious. Really did change how I viewed the team. So I really remember that very clearly.
My road trip story is very different, and it happened in Calgary, which I hadn't been to McMahon Stadium as press before, and so I didn't fully understand where it was I was supposed to pick up my press pass. It was described to me as being around the west side of the stadium. And so I arrived at McMahon, I walked around to the west side of the stadium, and nothing really stood out to me as a place where I would get my press pass. And there was a door there, and so I decided I'll just knock on this door and see if somebody answers it, and I can ask some further directions or questions. And so I knocked, waited for a few seconds, and then the doors opened by Bo Levi Mitchell. And I hi, Bo.
Very CFL moment.
Yeah, do you have my press pass? So, he was very kind. He said, I don't think I'm allowed to let you in here. Try walking a little further around the stadium. And so I just thought that, it was such a funny CFL moment to just knock on a random door in the back of the stadium, and who opens it but one of the most recognizable faces in the CFL, and one of the star quarterbacks of the last decade. So that was my favorite road story, and there were so many. We had such a good time out on the road this year. So getting to do that was really cool. And leading up to our road trip award, this is for the best road trip hosts. And of course, nobody could be as good as the crew at BMO in Chris Belenovich and company. But in terms of second best, the best road trip hosts, I'm going to give it to the BC Lions. Matt Baker, manager of communications out there, did such a great job just making me feel welcome, answering any questions I had, making sure that I was completely taken care of. I had a great time out there despite the result, with the Argos losing by 106. It was a wonderful trip, and in large part to what the BC Lions staff was able to put together for me. So they're the Xs and Argos award winner for road trip.
Did you see a win on a road trip, or they just get the doors blown off them every time?
I saw the win. Well, in terms of like a real road trip, like Saskatchewan, I was there for the game where they beat the COVID laden.
Oh yeah, no, that's true. That's a
Rough
win.
Riders.
That's a win.
It was still a win. It was Jake Dolegala at quarterback for the Rough Riders, but it was still a late fourth quarter victory. So that was more successful certainly than the Calgary and BC trips. That's for sure. This was one that I thought we needed. This is the Best Dancer Award, and I'm gonna quantify this by saying this is a far more important award than you realize. I loved at Argos practice how much dancing there was on this team. I've talked about this before in articles on podcasts. This is a very loose team. They knew how to bring it and focus when they had to turn it on, and they could unwind and have fun as well. And they had fun together. And I think that's a lot goes into that. And I give Coach Dinwiddie a lot of credit for this, for letting the guys enjoy themselves and sort of get loose, knowing that they would respond when he called on them to. And there's so much dancing at Argos practice. It's from station to station. It's between drills. It's on their way to stretching. It's during stretching. This is a team that loves dancing. This could have gone to a lot of different players. I sort of did an informal poll of players and some staff, and based on my own observations as well, we felt like there was a very deserving runner-up in Jamal Peters. Jamal Peters is a pretty entertaining dancer. There's a lot of Twitter footage of him dancing, even during Grey Cup week when he did what he called jiggin'. I think he said this is what we call that back home, which was a dance where he looked like his leg was broken and sort of dragged along behind him a little bit. I don't know enough to be able to explain that any better. But our award winner goes to Demonte Coxey, who was just next level. That man is a serious dancer, and as much fun as it is watching guys like Jagarrett Davis and Jamal Peters, nobody dances like Demonte Coxey. So he is our Xs and Argos Best Dancer Award winner. The Fan Friendly Award is one of my favorites because there are so many Argos who are fan friendly, who are excited to wait to talk to fans, to greet fans, to sign autographs. This team is fantastic with that. The CFL in general is fantastic with that. There was one guy I felt continued to go above and beyond, especially at practices, and that was Jagarrett Davis. He was. I noticed it especially with kids, with my kids, with other kids. He would always come up, give them fist bumps as they got off the bus on the way into the practice facility, and always have time for a wave or a conversation. And so this is probably the toughest award to hand out because it's a team full of guys that are great at it. But Jagarrett Davis is going to be our Fan Friendly Award winner. JB, that is just about going to do it for us on this wrap-up episode of the Xs and Argos podcast. We've got some thank yous as well. We want to thank everybody from the Toronto Argonauts for making this year as fantastic as it was for us. And we also want to thank you, the listener. You guys have been amazing since we started this thing, and our listenership doubled this season from last and continues to grow as it did throughout the playoffs. And we have you to thank for that. So thank you so much for your engagement, your involvement, your questions, and of course for listening and supporting our sponsors, Funny Bone Broth. You've been absolutely fantastic from day one, and it continues to get better and better and better. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Go Toronto Argos, go, go, go. Pull together, fight the foe.